The crash landing had not been in Marcus Vega's mission parameters. Neither was surviving on an uncharted planet with atmosphere that burned his lungs slightly with each breath. But here he was, dragging what remained of his survival gear through a forest of impossibly tall trees with luminescent blue bark. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Pathfinder 7, Marcus Vega, vessel severely damaged, position unknown. If anyone receives this, I am attempting to locate higher ground for signal amplification." Static answered him as it had for the past 6 hours. The quantum relay was damaged beyond field repair, turning his state-of-the-art communication device into an expensive paperweight. He'd need to manually boost the emergency beacon and pray someone was searching in the right sector. The forest grew denser as he trudged forward, the dual moons of Terraluna casting eerie shadows through the canopy. The xenobiology survey had mentioned indigenous fauna, but nothing that should pose a significant threat to an armed explorer. A piercing howl cut through the night, making Marcus freeze mid-step. The survey had definitely not mentioned that. He gripped his pulse pistol tighter, quickening his pace toward the rocky outcropping he'd spotted from his crash site. Another howl echoed, closer this time, followed by a sound that made his blood run cold, a distinctly feminine scream of pain. Against every protocol and instinct for self-preservation, Marcus changed direction. He found her in a small clearing, caught in what looked horrifyingly like a trap, metal teeth clamped around her leg, silvery blood pooling beneath her. She was humanoid but unmistakably alien, her skin a pale blue-gray, limbs slightly longer than human proportions, and most strikingly, covered in a fine silver fur that thickened around her face and down her spine. 2 pointed ears lay flat against her skull in obvious pain. When she sensed him, her head snapped up, revealing golden eyes with vertical pupils that widened in the darkness. She bared impressive canines and snarled, a deep rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate the air between them. "Easy," Marcus said softly, holstering his weapon and raising his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." She hissed words in an unknown language, clearly a warning. Despite her ferocity, Marcus could see she was weakening, her breathing labored, one hand pressed against a second wound in her side that looked like a deep puncture. "You're losing too much blood," he said, slowly reaching for his med kit. "I can help." She growled again but made no move to attack as he inched closer. Marcus suspected she couldn't. The trap had her firmly anchored, and the additional wound was serious. With deliberate movements, Marcus opened his kit and extracted a medical scanner. The alien woman watched him warily, muscles tensed despite her obvious pain. "This won't hurt," he explained, though he knew she couldn't understand. The scanner hummed as it analyzed her physiology. Her biology was remarkably similar to terrestrial mammals, with some key differences in blood composition and cellular structure. Most importantly, the scanner confirmed what he suspected. Without intervention, she would bleed out within hours. The trap itself was the first priority. It was crude but effective, a spring-loaded metal contraption that had thankfully missed her bones, but was doing significant damage to muscle tissue. "I'm going to open this," Marcus said, gesturing to the trap. "Then treat your wounds, understand?" Golden eyes studied him intensely before she gave what might have been a nod, a surprisingly human gesture. It took all his strength to pry the metal jaws apart, and when they finally released, she let out a keening sound that hurt his heart. Without hesitation, Marcus applied a hemostatic gel to the wound, watching in fascination as it bonded with her unusual blood chemistry. "That's working," he murmured with relief. "Now for your side." This wound was different, a clean puncture that looked like a blade or projectile. As he cleaned and sealed it, she watched him with an intensity that made his skin tingle. When he finished, Marcus offered her his water canteen. After a suspicious sniff, she drank deeply, then handed it back with a sound that might have been gratitude. "You're welcome," he said, settling back. "I'm Marcus." He tapped his chest, then pointed to her with a questioning look. She hesitated, then placed a clawed hand over her heart. "Kara," she said, the word resonant and rolling. She tried to stand but swayed dangerously. Marcus caught her arm, surprised by the steel-like muscle beneath the soft fur. For a moment they were face to face, her golden eyes mere inches from his. Something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or something deeper that Marcus couldn't name. Then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed against him, unconscious but alive. Marcus looked up at the alien moons, the unconscious woman in his arms, and the vast unknown forest around them. "Well," he whispered to himself, "I guess we're in this together now." He had no idea how right he was, or how completely this moment would change his fate forever. 3 days had passed since Marcus had saved Kara's life. 3 days of feeling her golden eyes tracking his every movement. She never approached his makeshift camp directly, but she was always there, a silvery shadow at the edge of his vision. "I know you're watching me," Marcus called out as he attempted to repair his communications array. The components were spread across a flat rock, half of them damaged beyond salvation. "You might as well come closer, I don't bite." Silence answered him, but minutes later, the faintest rustle of leaves announced her presence. Kara emerged from the blue-barked trees, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. Her wounds had healed with astonishing speed, leaving only faint silver lines against her blue-gray skin. "Hello again," Marcus said, trying to appear unthreatening while his heart raced. Up close, she was even more striking, tall and lithe, with that silver fur catching the alien sunlight. Her face was a fascinating blend of human and lupin features, beautiful in its otherworldliness. Kara cocked her head, studying him with those mesmerizing golden eyes. She made a series of clicks and growls that Marcus couldn't begin to interpret. "Sorry," he said, tapping his ear and shaking his head. "I don't understand." She approached cautiously, nostrils flaring as she scented him. Marcus remained perfectly still as she circled him, occasionally reaching out to touch his equipment with a curious claw. When she picked up his damaged quantum transponder, he instinctively reached for it. "Careful with that." Kara growled, backing away with the device. Marcus sighed, thinking he'd lost an essential component, when she surprised him by turning it over in her hands with obvious expertise. She pointed to a cracked crystal matrix at its core, then made a crushing motion with her hands. "Yes, it's broken," Marcus agreed. "No way to call home." She paced around his camp, occasionally sniffing the air and looking toward the horizon with concern. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling she was standing guard. "Are you protecting me?" he asked. Kara's ear twitched, and she made a sound that might have been affirmation. As the day wore on, Marcus continued his repairs while Kara maintained her silent vigil. Occasionally, she would disappear into the forest, returning with strange fruits that she would eat before offering some to Marcus. After scanning them with his analyzer and confirming they were safe, he accepted her offerings, finding them surprisingly sweet. At sunset, as Marcus prepared to light a fire, Kara suddenly tensed. She moved to his side with alarming speed, placing a clawed hand over his to stop him from striking the igniter. "What is it?" he asked. She pointed to the nearby grove of luminescent trees, then mimicked something flying, followed by a gesture of explosion. Marcus understood immediately. Something in the area was attracted to fire. "Thank you," he said sincerely, putting away the igniter. That night, as temperature dropped dramatically, Marcus huddled in his thermal blanket, teeth chattering despite the advanced material. He was startled when Kara appeared beside him, hesitating only briefly before settling against his back. Her body radiated heat like a furnace, and the silvery fur was softer than he'd imagined. "So you're nocturnal," he murmured, feeling her body temperature rise even further in the darkness. "That explains a few things." By morning, she was gone again, but Marcus found fresh water in his canteen and unknown berries laid carefully beside his pack. Over the next 2 days, they developed a peculiar form of communication. Marcus would speak aloud, processing his thoughts and plans, while Kara would respond with gestures, expressions, and occasionally drawings in the soil. She seemed particularly concerned when he mentioned hiking to higher ground for better transmission. On the third morning, Marcus awoke to find Kara agitated, packing the perimeter of his camp and occasionally casting worried glances at the sky. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately alert. She pointed upward, then mimicked something falling before drawing a circle in the dirt with lines radiating outward. An explosion. Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Something's coming down, a ship." Kara nodded emphatically, then drew a shape that looked disturbingly like a weapon. "Hostile?" Marcus asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Her answering growl told him everything he needed to know. She tugged at his sleeve, pointing urgently toward a range of rocky hills to the west. "You want us to go there, together?" For the first time, Kara spoke a word he understood, her voice surprisingly melodic despite its growling undertone. "Together." As they gathered his essential gear, Marcus caught Kara watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't just protectiveness in those golden eyes. There was something deeper, something that made his pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. When their hands briefly touched as she helped him with his pack, a jolt of electricity seemed to pass between them. Kara didn't pull away. Instead, she deliberately pressed her palm to his, their fingers aligning despite their anatomical differences. "I guess we really are in this together now," Marcus said softly. Kara didn't need to understand his words to recognize the promise in them. She led him into the forest with newfound purpose, her silver form always within reach as the sound of engines began to rumble in the distant sky. The ships had landed 3 valleys away, but Marcus could still hear the occasional distant rumble of machinery. They had spent 2 days hiding in a network of caves within the Rocky Hills, venturing out only when necessary. Kara had grown increasingly restless, her ears constantly swiveling toward the direction of the intruders. "I need components," Marcus explained, laying out his damaged equipment. "If I can get my scanner working properly, we might be able to identify who these visitors are." Kara's eyes narrowed as she considered his words. Though they couldn't speak each other's languages, she had proven remarkably adept at understanding his intentions. She made a series of gestures that Marcus had come to recognize. She would go scouting while he remained hidden. "No," Marcus said firmly. "We go together or not at all." The look she gave him was equal parts exasperation and something that might have been admiration. Finally, she nodded, though her posture suggested she was not entirely pleased with the arrangement. They ventured from the caves at dawn, moving silently through the blue forest. Kara led them on a circuitous route that avoided open spaces, occasionally stopping to scent the air or listen with those expressive ears. Twice, she pulled Marcus behind cover seconds before strange, flying creatures passed overhead. Not ships, but some kind of native avian predator with metallic scales instead of feathers. By midday, they had reached the edge of what appeared to be a small crater. In its center lay fragments of a vessel, not Marcus's crashed ship, but something else. Something that looked disturbingly familiar. "That's a human mining probe," Marcus whispered in shock. "What is Terrestrial Resources Corporation doing out here? This sector isn't cleared for commercial exploration." Kara growled softly, her fur bristling as she pointed to markings on the ground around the probe. Tracks unlike any Marcus had seen before, 3-toed with deep claw marks. "Friends of yours?" Marcus asked. She shook her head emphatically, then bared her teeth in what was clearly a sign of hostility. "Enemies then, great." As Marcus carefully approached the crashed probe, searching for salvageable components, Kara grew increasingly agitated. She kept glancing at the sun's position, then making urgent gestures for them to leave. Marcus nodded, pocketing a few critical parts before following her away from the site. They had barely made it halfway back to their hideout when Kara suddenly froze. Her ears flattened against her skull, and a low, warning rumble emanated from her chest. Before Marcus could react, she shoved him roughly behind an enormous fallen tree trunk, her body tense as a coiled spring. 3 figures emerged from the forest, bipedal like Kara, but larger, with darker gray fur and eyes that glowed an unsettling crimson. They carried what appeared to be crude but effective weapons fashioned from bone and some kind of crystalline material. Their scent was immediately different from Kara's. Where she smelled of something like cedar and warm spice, these creatures carried the metallic tang of old blood. Marcus held his breath as they moved past their hiding spot. Kara's body was pressed against his, her heartbeat rapid but controlled. One of the creatures paused, lifting its snout to the air. It had caught their scent. A guttural call alerted the others, and suddenly all three were advancing on their position. Marcus reached for his pulse pistol, but Kara's hand clamped over his with surprising strength. Their eyes met in a moment of silent communication. "This is not your fight." Before he could protest, Kara was moving. She vaulted over their cover with inhuman grace, landing directly in front of their pursuers. What happened next would forever change how Marcus saw her. Kara's form seemed to ripple, her already impressive musculature swelling as her posture shifted to something more primal, more wolf-like while still maintaining her bipedal stance. Her claws extended, silver fur bristling to make her appear twice her size, and her golden eyes blazed with inner light. The confrontation was brief and brutal. The attackers were strong, but Kara was a blur of savage precision. She didn't just fight, she danced, anticipating their movements with uncanny accuracy. When one managed to slash her shoulder with a crystalline blade, she didn't falter. Instead, she seemed to channel the pain into greater ferocity, her claws finding vulnerable points with surgical precision. When it was over, two of the attackers lay unconscious, and the third had fled into the forest. Kara stood victorious, chest heaving, blood, both silver and a strange dark purple, staining her fur. As her form gradually returned to its more humanoid appearance, she turned to Marcus with uncertainty in her eyes, as if afraid of what he might think of her now. Instead of fear, Marcus felt awe, and something else, something he wasn't quite ready to name. "You're hurt," he said, approaching her slowly. "Let me help you as you've helped me." In the fatting daylight of the alien forest, Marcus cleaned and dressed her wounds. Their faces were close, breath mingling in the cooling air. Kara's golden eyes never left his, searching for something, acceptance perhaps, or understanding. "Thank you," Marcus said softly, resting his hand against the uninjured side of her face, "for protecting me." Kara leaned into his touch, a soft purring sound emanating from her chest. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her hand over his heart. Then, with equal care, she placed his hand over hers. "Life debt," she said in her rumbling accent, one of the few human words she had picked up from him. But she shook her head as if the translation wasn't quite right. She tapped his chest, then hers again. "More." In the growing darkness, with danger all around them, Marcus finally understood. This wasn't just protection born of obligation. What had grown between them was something neither of their species had words for, something both simpler and more profound. When her lips met his, tentative and questioning, Marcus answered with certainty. The kiss deepened, bridging worlds, differences falling away in the ancient language of desire. Later, as they lay together beneath the alien stars, Kara's warm body curled protectively around his. Marcus knew their fates were now irrevocably intertwined, for better or worse. The sound of distant engines grew louder each day. Using the salvaged components, Marcus had finally managed to boost his scanner's range enough to confirm what he'd suspected. The vessels belonged to Terrestrial Resources Corporation, a notoriously aggressive mining conglomerate known for exploiting legal loopholes to secure resource rights on frontier worlds. "They're not here for me," Marcus explained to Kara as they observed the distant camp from their hillside vantage point. "They probably don't even know I'm here." Kara's expression remained grim as she studied the growing human settlement through Marcus's binoculars. Over the past weeks, her understanding of his language had improved dramatically, though she still struggled with complex sentences. Her own language remained largely impenetrable to Marcus, consisting of subtle variations in growls, clicks, and body language that his human senses couldn't fully appreciate. "Bad people," she said simply, returning the binoculars. "Hunt my kind, long time." Marcus frowned. "You've encountered humans before." Kara nodded, her golden eyes darkening with memory. "Come in sky ships, take land, take." She struggled for the word, finally settling on shining stones. "Minerals," Marcus supplied. "They're miners." "Kill those who fight," Kara added, drawing a claw across her throat in unmistakable meaning. Marcus felt sick. He had suspected TRC of cutting ethical corners before, but outright violence against sentient beings was beyond the pale and illegal under interstellar coalition law. As a Pathfinder, his duty was clear. He needed to investigate and report back. I need to get closer, he decided. Document what they're doing. Kara's answering growl was immediate and protective. Dangerous. I know, Marcus acknowledged, reaching out to touch her face gently. Since their first kiss, touches between them had become more frequent, more assured. But if I can prove they're violating first contact protocols, I can stop them. Protect your people. The struggle played out visibly across Kara's features, her instinct to keep him safe warring with her understanding of the greater threat. Finally, she nodded. Not alone, she insisted. Together. Marcus smiled, always. They approached the human camp under cover of darkness. Kara moved like a ghost through the shadows, while Marcus followed as quietly as his human limitations allowed. The perimeter was poorly guarded, the corporation clearly not expecting resistance on what they'd assumed was an uninhabited world. They had nearly reached the command center when floodlights suddenly blazed to life, bathing the area in harsh illumination. Alarms blared as security personnel converged on their position. Run, Marcus shouted, pushing Kara toward the darkness, but it was too late. They were surrounded. Hands where we can see them, ordered a voice through an amplified speaker. Step away from the alien, sir. Marcus raised his hands slowly but held his ground beside Kara, whose fur was standing on end, her body coiled for action. I am Pathfinder Marcus Vega, he announced loudly. This is a protected sector under interstellar coalition law. Your presence here is unauthorized. A woman in TRC executive armor stepped forward, her expression a mixture of surprise and calculation. Commander Diana Frost, TRC Resource Acquisition. We received no notification of Pathfinder activity in this sector. That's because I crashed, Marcus replied evenly. But that doesn't change the legal status of this planet or its indigenous sentient population. Frost's eyes narrowed as she studied Kara. Sentient? Our initial surveys showed only primitive life forms, nothing approaching sapience. Then your surveys were conveniently incomplete, Marcus stated coldly. You're in violation of multiple laws, Commander. I suggest you prepare your teams for immediate withdrawal. A tense silence followed before Frost smiled thinly. Remarkable coincidence, finding you alive after all this time, Pathfinder Vega. Your emergency beacon went silent weeks ago. We assumed the worst. The implication was clear. They had detected his beacon but chosen to ignore it. However, Frost continued smoothly, we should get you medical attention. You've clearly been through an ordeal. As for your companion, our xenobiology team would be fascinated to study such an unusual specimen. She's not a specimen, Marcus growled, unconsciously mimicking Kara's defensive posture. She's a person. Of course, Frost said, her tone patronizing. Security, escort Pathfinder Vega to medical, secure the alien for study. As the guards moved forward, Kara let out a warning growl that stopped them in their tracks. The standoff might have escalated into violence if not for the sudden, resonant howl that echoed across the compound. From the darkness beyond the floodlights emerged dozens of glowing golden eyes. Kara's people had arrived, silent and menacing, surrounding the human camp. In the confusion, Kara grabbed Marcus's hand and pulled him toward the tree line. Guards shouted and weapons were raised, but Frost's voice cut through the chaos. Hold your fire, we're outnumbered. They ran until they reached the safety of the forest, where more of Kara's kind waited. Unlike the dark-furred hostiles they'd encountered earlier, these individuals shared Kara's silver coloration and golden eyes. They regarded Marcus with obvious curiosity and wariness. An older female stepped forward, her fur bearing streaks of white. She exchanged complex vocalizations with Kara, who responded with deferential body language. Marcus recognized the signs of a hierarchical interaction. The older female was clearly a leader of some kind. When their conversation ended, Kara turned to Marcus. My mother, she explained, Elder of Luna clan, she says come, village safe. As they journeyed deeper into the forest, Marcus learned more about Kara's people, the Lunari, and their conflict with both the human miners and the rival clan, the Blood Moons, who had allied with the humans in exchange for weapons. By dawn, they reached a hidden valley where structures of living wood and crystal formed a beautiful, organic settlement. The Lunari village hummed with activity as warriors prepared for what appeared to be an imminent conflict. Your people, Kara said, gesturing to the human camp miles away, bring war. My people prepare. Marcus looked around at the Lunari preparing their primitive but effective weapons, then back at Kara, this extraordinary woman who had become so much more than a guardian to him. They aren't my people, he said firmly, taking her hands in his. Not anymore, not if they've done what you say. Kara's eyes widened slightly, understanding the significance of his words. She pressed her forehead to his in a gesture of deep intimacy, her voice a soft rumble. Then where does Marcus belong? The answer came to him with surprising clarity as he pulled her closer, breathing in her wild, wonderful scent. With you, he whispered against her fur, if you'll have me. Her answering purr vibrated through his chest as her arms encircled him possessively. Around them, the Lunari watched this unprecedented bond with expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval to hope. In the Elder's dwelling later that night, as plans for negotiations were discussed, Marcus realized the true complexity of his situation. He had come to this planet as an explorer and would leave, if he left at all, as something entirely new. A bridge between worlds and a man irrevocably changed by golden eyes and the fierce love of a woman born beneath alien moons. The great hall of the Lunari vibrated with tension. At one end sat Commander Frost and her security detail, their postures rigid and hands never straying far from their weapons. At the other, the Lunari Council of Elders, including Kara's mother, Selene, maintained a wary vigilance. In the center stood Marcus and Kara, neither fully belonging to either side yet crucial to both. The corporation has rights to any uninhabited world in this sector, Frost insisted, her voice clipped. Our surveys showed no signs of intelligent life. Because you looked from orbit, Marcus countered. Basic protocol requires ground exploration before resource extraction begins. Which you conveniently bypassed, added Kara, her accent thick but her meaning clear. The humans looked startled at her use of their language. Selene stepped forward, her silver-white fur catching the light filtering through the crystal dome above. For generations, we have watched your kind. Some came with curiosity. She nodded toward Marcus. Others came with greed, her golden eyes fixed on Frost. We remained hidden, but our world has always been here. The crystalline formations you're mining, Marcus explained. They're sacred to the Lunari. More than that, they're integral to their ecosystem. Frost's expression hardened. Those sacred formations contain the highest concentration of quantum-resonant ceridium ever discovered, worth billions. Worth more than lives, Kara growled. The negotiations continued into the night, growing increasingly heated. The Lunari would not surrender their ancestral lands. TRC would not abandon their investment. A compromise seemed impossible until Marcus proposed a solution. A joint operation where the Lunari would permit limited extraction in specific areas, using methods that preserved the ecosystem, in exchange for technology, medicine, and formal recognition as a sovereign species under coalition protection. As the two parties reluctantly considered the proposal, an explosion rocked the village. Ambush, shouted one of the TRC guards, drawing his weapon. Chaos erupted as Blood Moon warriors poured into the hall, accompanied by several humans in TRC mining gear, but not security uniforms. Kara immediately placed herself before Marcus, transforming partially as her claws extended. This isn't us, Frost yelled over the din, looking genuinely shocked as her own security team engaged the attackers. It became clear that a faction within TRC had allied with the Blood Moon clan, arming them in exchange for help eliminating both the Lunari leadership and any witnesses to their illegal operations, including Commander Frost and her loyal personnel. In the confusion, Marcus spotted a Blood Moon warrior taking aim at Selene with a human weapon. Without hesitation, he tackled the attacker, the energy blast grazing his shoulder instead of hitting its intended target. Kara roared with fury when she saw Marcus wounded, launching herself at the enemy with devastating precision. Together with Frost's security team and the Lunari warriors, they gradually pushed back the attackers. As the battle subsided, leaving the hall damaged but the alliance unexpectedly strengthened by their shared defense, Marcus leaned heavily against Kara, his shoulder burning from the energy weapon's touch. "Always saving each other," he murmured weakly, looking up at her with pain-clouded eyes. Kara's expression was fierce as she lifted him effortlessly. "Mine to protect," she stated, as if it were the simplest truth in the universe. In the aftermath, as Lunari healers treated the injured of both species, something fundamental had changed. The shared threat had created an unlikely bond between former adversaries. Commander Frost, nursing a wound of her own, approached Marcus as he sat outside the healing chambers, his shoulder wrapped in bioluminescent leaves that numbed the pain. "You were right," she admitted reluctantly. "I've contacted Coalition headquarters. They're sending investigators and diplomats." She paused, studying him. "They're also sending a transport for you, standard extraction protocol for recovered Pathfinders." Marcus felt his heart constrict at the thought of leaving. Before he could respond, Kara emerged from the healing chamber, immediately sensing his distress. She moved to his side, her presence both comfort and strength. "I'm not leaving," he said firmly, reaching for Kara's hand. Frost raised an eyebrow. "This isn't a simple decision, Vega. You're talking about abandoning your career, your species." "I'm talking about choosing my future," Marcus interrupted. "Someone needs to serve as liaison between humans and the Lunari, who better than me. And someone must teach my people that not all humans bring destruction," Kara added, her fingers intertwining with his despite their different anatomies. "Who better than us?" 3 months later, as Terra Luna's dual moons rose over the newly established joint settlement, Marcus stood on the balcony of their dwelling, a harmonious blend of human technology and Lunari organic architecture. Behind him, Kara approached silently, wrapping her arms around him, her warmth a welcome shield against the night's chill. "Coalition Council-approved treaty," she said, her command of human language improving daily. "Your testimony made difference." Marcus turned in her embrace, marveling as he always did at how perfectly they fit together despite their differences. "Our testimony," he corrected gently. "We did this together." The official recognition of the Lunari as a sentient species under Coalition protection had been expedited, largely due to the evidence Marcus had compiled about TRC's violations. The corporation now operated under strict oversight, with fair compensation flowing to the Lunari clans. Even the Blood Moons had begun tentative peace talks, impressed by the strength of the new alliance. "Never thought saving wounded warrior would lead to this," Kara murmured, pressing her face into the crook of his neck, inhaling his scent in the intimate gesture of her people. "When you first started following me around, I thought I was being hunted," Marcus admitted with a chuckle. Kara pulled back, her golden eyes gleaming with mischief. "Was hunting, best prey I ever caught." Her playful growl sent pleasant shivers down his spine as she guided him back into their dwelling, toward the nest of soft furs that served as their bed. In the silvery moonlight, their shadows merged into one as clothing and inhibitions fell away. Their lovemaking was always a beautiful contradiction, tender yet fierce, gentle yet primal. Kara's claws carefully traced paths of pleasure across his skin, while Marcus learned exactly how to touch her to elicit those rumbling purrs that vibrated through both their bodies. They had discovered a harmony between their different physiologies that left them both breathless and complete. Later, as they lay entwined beneath the glow of bioluminescent crystals, Kara's head resting on his chest and his fingers combing through her silken fur, Marcus reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them here. "The elders say our bond is unprecedented," Kara murmured sleepily. "First of its kind." "Pioneers," Marcus agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "But not last," she added with certainty. Others will follow, bridge between worlds. As if to emphasize her point, she guided his hand to her abdomen, where the slightest swell was just becoming noticeable. Marcus's breath caught as understanding dawned. Their genetic compatibility had been confirmed by Lunari healers and human scientists alike, but the reality of it still amazed him. "Our cub will be first of new kind," Kara said, her voice filled with pride and wonder. "Neither fully human nor fully Lunari, something new, something better." Marcus pulled her closer, overwhelmed by love for this fierce, beautiful guardian who had become his entire world, and for the miraculous new life they had created together. "From the moment I found you in that trap, we've been creating something new," he whispered. "Something neither of us could have imagined alone." Outside their window, the settlement hummed with the sounds of two species learning to coexist. Inside, in the warm cocoon of their embrace, the future was already taking shape, wild and uncertain but faced together. Kara's golden eyes drifted closed as she nestled against him, her final words before sleep a perfect summary of their extraordinary bond. "Saved each other, protected each other, now we build together." Marcus smiled into the darkness, his hand resting protectively over their growing child. What had begun with an act of kindness toward an injured alien had transformed into something profound, a love that transcended worlds and a new beginning for them all.